It is Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. It is 5:31 p.m. And I'm calling, excuse me, this Board of Education work session to order. We are holding this remotely as per the Governor's Emergency Orders 2020-04, Section 8, and Emergency Order 12, Section 3. We are still under the Governor's state of emergency. So, Mr. Guarino, could you please call the roll?
Okay. Mr. Guarino is here. Ms. Johnson?
Present.
Ms. Ziem? No, I don't see her yet.
She's going to be late.
Okay. Ms. Bishop?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Ms. Giulio?
I'm here.
Okay. Ms. Brown? Is here.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Raymond?
Here.
Okay. Ms. Roden?
Here.
Okay. Ms. Timmons?
Here.
Okay. Also with us, we have Dr. Moseley and Ms. Kinsley and Ms. Hines. And I believe that's it.
We do have a quorum.
Yes.
So
Yes,
we
we
are
do.
good to go. I believe that a couple members might be, here we go, might be joining us a bit late, and our student members of the board wanted to join us as well. So
Okay.
welcome, Mr. Gao.
Mr. Gao is here, okay.
Do we know if Mr. Norris was going to try and log in as well?
I did text him, so.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so we'll find out. So tonight is a work session of the Board of Education. I think this might be our first work session of 2020. And typically with a work session, the meeting is called for one topic for one specific purpose. In this case, it's for an update on the reopening task force that we charged Dr. Moseley with getting started at our last meeting 2 weeks ago. So this is it 2 weeks ago or last week? It doesn't matter. Anyways, I know that it's been very recent, but we're at a particular time crunch. And so I've asked Dr. Moseley to give us some regular updates so that we're aware of what the task force is working on, and if any challenges are popping up that we ought to know about, that we could potentially help with. So having said that, I have really nothing else to say at this point, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Moseley, Ms. Hines, and Ms. Giulio, who is the co-chair of the task force. I'm muting myself, so you can go right ahead when you're ready. I think Dr. Moseley or Ms. Hines. Okay, I'm still
Dr. Moseley, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm still only hearing silence.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board and to the public. Today's purpose is to just give you, the board and the public, an update on how we're progressing with the reopening task force progress. Understand that this is all, I would say it's still a work in progress. I never want to say something set in stone. We're always subject to another edict coming out of the DOE, or even something coming out from the State Department in public health. I would say this was a collaborative effort over the last, and again, everything, please don't quote me on the dates, please don't quote me on the times. Every day feels like the same day. I'd like to say over the last 2 weeks, Sharon, we probably have met maybe 4 or 5 times, just coordinating and organizing and giving each other feedback on just the data of the process and what has happened so far. I'm going to run through some slides that captures the items on the agenda, and then we can open it up for discussion, and we will take it from there. I just wanted to alert to the board and to the public. I'm not going to read I'm not going to read every single PowerPoint slide per se. That's like death by PowerPoint. I think people can read, but I'll talk around the slides and summarize as I start to move through it, the presentation. Okay, so a couple of things is that the charge of the district, the charge of the reopening task force was really to examine the safest conditions to open school for staff and students. Also provide and use data recommendations coming from the New Hampshire Department of Education, Public Health Department in the city, the CDC, any type of medical recommendations coming from our schools as well, the Nurses Association, to make these recommendations. We also wanted to select this model in a timely manner. Whatever model we select, we need to make sure that we have enough time. I use this analogy to turn a large ship, the ship being Nashua, in a way that we can inform parents, students, and faculty in terms of what it feels like to reopen our schools in September. There are some things that pop up in my mind, in our minds, as we work through this. Certainly making sure that we have a level of understanding and communication throughout our schools and also to the public, but also monitoring student safety. So this is the only this is the only slide I'm going to turn over to Stacy Hines. Stacy was charged in this case to reach out with people, to see if there was an interest. And believe it or not, we had, Stacy, please correct me, over 168 people in terms of volunteering to be on the task force. Just to be clear, there's a difference between task force members and subgroup membership. And I will talk and distinguish between the two when we progress. So Stacy, this is your slide, and then I'm going to take over from the rest.
All right. Thank you. Yes, we do have a full complement of task force members. They have all been confirmed. And if you remember, we did add 2 students and 2 parents to the group. And we also have reached out to Bobby Bagley, who is the Director of Public Health and Community Services, and obviously is a very important and informed public health official in our city. And certainly she said she would be more than willing to work with the task force, help to answer any questions, give us an update on the status of any recommendations to safeguard our staff and students. And I'm delighted that she's willing to serve in an advisory capacity to our task force. You can see the profile that Dr. Moseley presented at the last couple weeks ago when you had your meeting. And we have a full complement of task force members who are really eager and ready to go. And I think it's been remarkable, the response that I've received. We are just so pleased with so many people recognizing what an important job this task force has ahead of them. So compliments and thank you for any of those who might be listening who are part of the task force. So thank you.
So maybe do you want to talk at the end, Stacy? Because the questions that come to mind is, how do we know who's on the task force, and what type of notification will they get? And even people who were not selected to be on the task force, there are opportunities for them to be a part of this process. So Stacy, could you just inform the public what that next process feels like in terms of notification?
Right. We decided to wait to notify the entire task force as a group until after this work session in case there were any additional questions or about membership. So if we get the green light, we'll go ahead and notify them all tomorrow. Okay. And as far as the timeline, I think Dr. Moseley is going to talk about that in a few minutes. And we're hoping to have 2 or 3 meetings with the task force over the next 2 months or a month and a half. And I think everyone is ready to go.
That sound fair enough, Sharon? Okay. All right. So part of this is that the task force, we have approximately 34 members. Is that correct, Stacy? 26. 26 members for the task force. But underneath that task force, we have subgroups. And we have subgroups that we still need, where the other, I think we said 120, where the other, I said 160, 160,
162.
what's that?
There were 162.
Oh, 162, okay. But there are, if individuals were not selected to be part of the overall task force, and I'll get to that, they can also participate in the subgroup. The question is, how many different subgroups are there? And so together, we identified the various subgroups which are listed here. These subgroups work underneath the task force. They feed into the data collection as we start to look at different models and recommendations, and we have various questions about how and what this feels like according to the different subgroups. And you'll see that we pretty much covered all of what we could see, and maybe there's some blind spots of where if we were to reopen, where we would be looking for some feedback in these areas. And we think it's very important to understand that it's very, very complex and vast when you're talking of a district of 11,000 students and over about 3,500 employees. These subgroups would be chaired by individuals who have expertise. And for example, the best example that I can give you, if I could just jump back here, is that the plant operations and transportation. The chairperson for that particular subgroup would be Dan Donovan. He has the most knowledge of it. He has the most, he understands the transportation, the contracts, plant ops, all of that. That's just one example. Food service would be likely Dahlia Daigle, who is also in charge of food service. Remote learning, that's going to be Dr. McKinney. So I'm just kind of throwing out some things that as we start to, sorry, not things, as I'm throwing out potential individuals to be chairs of these subgroups. I'm going to, just for the public and for the board, I'm going to show a model of how this all fits. And I use the phrase, what does this look like? In terms of presentation, if I'm looking over here, it's only because I have the presentation over here and it's larger on a larger monitor. So it's just easier to read and reference to. Now, after this meeting, our intent is to identify the chairs of these subgroups, and you can locate those chairs on our website. We have to understand that if individuals decide to be part of these subgroups, the time frame and the meetings are what they are. We can't really reschedule them that much because we are on a very, very tight schedule, and that schedule is, we're looking to make some recommendations by the end of July, definitely the first week in August. So we're going to be pretty regimented when it comes to the schedule. I'll get to this in a second, but our subgroups will meet to answer questions or address questions underneath the category of district operations, materials, personnel, costs, and miscellaneous. They'll also be able to identify some of the challenges and the positive through the prism of each of our models. Just to recall to the public and to the board agreed that there was a hybrid model that we were looking at and continuing on with remote learning as a model that we would further explore. So how does it all fit into the big picture? And so one of the things, and that I want to give credit to Ms. Kinsella, when we were talking about what does it feel like, what does it look like, and we were saying, how do we conceptualize this? And so if I can just show, can everyone see, if I can just show this, that these little, or shouldn't say boxes, but yeah, these boxes represent the subgroup. And these subgroups are going to give or address questions according to their discipline and feed that into the to the reopening task force. And they'll use that data from the subgroups to generate recommendations for reopening. I also want to call to the board that that's one set of data collection. The other set of data collection that's currently active is our surveys that we have on our website that the public can also answer and address as well. So we have these subgroups here with each of the disciplines that I've listed right here that feed into our 26 member reopening task force. And these recommendations are going to be generated here and then pushed up for the board, or in this case, sent to the board for consideration on or before the end of July. When we talk about feedback, we're looking for feedback on our hybrid model and what that feels and looks like. Essentially, our hybrid model is remote learning coupled with going back in some capacity, continuing on with our remote learning platform as it exists in the current form. I do note that all of these models and recommendations are all contingent on the CDC recommendations and city public health recommendations and guidelines. When we talk about viability, we ask our questions, and Sharon and Tara and Yenny and Stacy, we were asking questions to ourselves, and just like, what models will be conducive for the school district? And we were thinking about what factors should we consider when we think about selecting the model? What are we really going to try to hone in on? We had to think about the resources, population, timing, staff, and all of this comes at some cost one way or another. And finally, who's the point person? Who is responsible? We all have to stay in our lanes in one respect, but we certainly can't do it all. So it was important and imperative for us to identify individuals within our district and also within our leadership team that could answer these questions. And one of the things I think it's very important, when we first met, the data and the information coming out of the city, coming out of the state, coming out of the CDC is very, very different than what it feels like now. And so part of this is that we have to be flexible. We have to understand that I use the word scoreboard, and I use the word scoreboard. Stephen Covey was, I think it was like 7 Habits of Effective People or 7 Habits of, I think there were 9. I can't remember now. But anyways, he had this little vignette about the scoreboard, making sure that you know what that scoreboard feels and looks like for, in this case, I think he was talking about employees and the employer. But what we're saying is that we have to understand that we have to remain flexible and adaptable during this time. Nothing is set in stone. And sometimes that scoreboard changes because we have no control over it. So when that scoreboard changes, we have to understand that that has an impact on communication, leadership, workflow, work production, work refinement. And we have to understand in this environment, things change quite quickly. And in a district this size, we have to be careful that when we finally communicate that change, that it's consistent throughout our change. And I say change, but I say chain of command. It starts at the central office, works its way down to our schools at different levels. And what we found that sometimes, not all the time, depending on the level, different teachers and administrators read communication and intent very, very differently. So we have to be strategic in our communication and workflow, but also recognizing that it does change on a dime. The perfect example I want to say, being flexible about the scoreboard. When we first started this, if you will recall to the board, I did not put anything in writing around a work session. And so I just highlighted just here that in red that flexibility starts with just a work session like this is another, what I say, change of the scoreboard. As I said when I proposed this, that this is a proposed timeline. There's nothing set in stone, but the intent is to make sure that there's a timely recommendations and guidelines that we can give to the board when starting to think about reopening. Wanted to talk a little bit about methodology, the questions that come up about methodology. How are we going to collect data? How does it all fit into the bigger picture? What are some things that we thought about as we started to work through this? And so part of this, from with Sharon, from Stacy, from Tara, to Yeti, they said, we have to really create don't use bullet points, don't write it all out. Just put it in a kind of a nice, but a conceptual model where people can look at this and say, what am I looking at? What are the expectations? How are you going to go about this? And part of that is that, as I mentioned earlier, number one, we already have our surveys out. Number two, the public and the board just recently heard around our subgroups, and we're going to use the questions, and I'll get to the questions in a second, for our subgroups to react to. Those questions are going to guide the reopening task force to generate recommendations to the Board of Education based on the information from the subgroups in the data. And then, as I said, sorry about that. School district. And the school district will adopt one of the models. Hopefully, I said August 1st, but I could probably say by August 1st, or hopefully even earlier than that, like July 31st or whatever the board should choose. Now, I keep making reference to the questions. So what Yeti and Tara, I can't remember, Sharon Giglio, what they and Stacy, what they came up with is like, okay, so if we're going to have our subgroups working together and working in unison, we have to make sure that we have clear categories that they're reacting to. We want to make sure it's focused. We don't want to just give our subgroups and say, okay, tell me what you think about reopening. That's not going to work. So this is just a snapshot that we created, this Google Doc of under model 2, we have plan ops. That's a subgroup. But then we have under that, we have district operations. And these are questions that this particular subgroup needs to react to under district operation. Then we move down to materials. Basically, again, these are questions or thoughts that the questions that this subgroup needs to react to under materials. Personnel. These are questions that this group will need to react to. Cost, same thing. And we put down miscellaneous. Sometimes we just might have missed something, whether it's another question or thought or even other considerations. I'm not I don't think this isn't to be disrespectful to Sharon, Tara, Stacy, or Yeti, but I don't think we're experts in plan ops. We're just not. So we might have missed something, which is okay. Let's just jump down to, and this is all a common theme. We had school medical personnel. Again, you see district operations, materials, personnel, costs. So as you can see, there's the sense of 5 categories that are consistent throughout all of the subgroups. So when we get this data back, we can start to categorize it based on district operations, materials, personnel, costs, and maybe something else we missed. So those are questions. And those questions are not all the same because there's different questions for different types of subgroups. Let me see if I can find it. By far, I would say that the most questions, Garth, if he's watching, he's not going to be too happy, but it is what it is. I would say the most questions were from remote learning. I mean, it was the most vast. And if we think about it, remote learning would have these questions because you have different disciplines. It crosses over through ELL, special ed, all of these different academics within the district. So that's when I talk about the subgroups reacting to questions, those are the questions that I'm making reference to. Now, ultimately, what's the end game here and what to expect? I'd like to say that this is the model that we came up with around the end game, establish a reopening task force, which we have done that. We've established categories of subgroups based on categories. We've done that. Subgroup questions, we've done that, as I shared with you before. The next steps in this is to have the subgroups react to the questions. Also, we're going to close out our survey in the coming weeks. And finally, the goal is to make sure that we provide the task force generates recommendations for the board to consider. And then with the final slide, and then we can open it up for discussion. The ultimate goal is to have safe return to school for students, staff, and faculty according to the recommended model or whatever the board shall choose. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Moseley.
I'm sorry, did I miss anything, Stacy, Tara, Sharon?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
It looks good.
All right.
Great, thank you, Dr. Moseley. I really appreciate your thorough slides. I think at this point, what I'd like to do is open the floor for questions, but I can't see people
I can't either.
while the slides are up. So I would ask that people use the chat feature.
Okay.
And then if you indicate under the chat that you have a question, don't write the question, just say, your name
You can
or
move
me.
you can make the screen smaller. There's a way to do that. Move your cursor up.
Look at that, but now I can't read the screen. Anyways, I'll do
Right,
that.
can't
Does
read the
anyone
screen, but you can see the people.
can see the people?
Can't do both at the same time.
Okay, I will do my best. Does anyone have a question or a comment or anything at this point? No? Okay. I have a question.
I
Oh,
do. It's
Okay,
Dottie.
go ahead. Go ahead, Dottie.
They said there were 3 teachers on the one large committee.
Yes.
I'd like to ask, is there one from each level?
There's one from each level, and
Okay.
one of the 3 is also a unified arts person.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
And are there teachers on the subcommittees as well? Or
If they so
subgroups,
choose.
I think we're calling them. Yeah.
If they so choose, yes, they'll have an opportunity, depending on
Okay.
what they would like.
And then if you can go back to that slide with the large task force membership, I wasn't able to write it down fast enough.
Right here. You mean this one? You don't. Once I'm done, I'll send it to the board. This.
No, the first one. Yes, that one. Now I have to make it big again. I missed the last 2, but I had asked both Miss Giglio and Miss Brown had volunteered to be part of the task force. So I know Miss Giglio was co-chair. I'm curious about where the other board member fits in. Are you planning to put them on the task force membership or on subgroups? What's the plan?
I think I can answer that, Ms. Raymond. That is because we also had you had asked for 2 parents. I basically have Ms. Brown wearing 2 hats. She obviously not only is a Board of Education member, but also as a parent. So she is one of the 2 parents serving on the reopening task force.
Okay, excellent. Ms. Brown, is that something you're comfortable with? I think she got frozen, but she gave us a thumbs up before she got
Good.
frozen.
Frozen.
Okay, good.
Sorry,
So
I apologize for that. I just got kicked out of the meeting for a second. So yes, I'm comfortable with that. Thank you. And actually was going to be my question was, how were the parent members selected?
I can answer that. They were volunteers.
okay, and you got lots and lots and lots of volunteers. So I'm really excited to hear that so many people are interested in participating. Oh, see, now I can see everybody and people are using it. So my list is Ms. Johnson, Ms. Timmons, and then Mr. Guarino.
Thank you. How many parents asked to be on these committees? How many of them came forward?
I had most of the parents who stepped forward were also employees. So I thought that was a good balance. So there was one woman who strongly was advocating to be on the committee. She also is a member of the food service department. So she and Ms. Brown will be the 2 parents on the reopening task force.
Okay. Did we have any parents from outside the district that are employees that came forward, asked to be on any of committees?
The parent involvement primarily is through the survey that was distributed, so we could give their feedback. And certainly the subgroups is where I think the meat and potatoes are of this entire process. And that's where we see more parent involvement and more people
Okay.
stepping up and being able to give their feedback.
Okay, so we're just taking parent involvement off of a survey. We're not actually having them be in a subcommittee at all, like?
No, we will certainly, as the chairs of the subcommittees, review the questions. We can certainly involve them so they can have their feedback.
Okay, because I remember when we talked about this, I said the most important thing is really parent involvement, not just a survey, but parents being in the group and having them speak and being part of this. That's what my whole issue was, because I want the parents in the community to be part of this, not just in a survey. And Dr. Moseley, how come we didn't get a copy of this presentation prior to? It would have been easier to kind of follow. I'm one of these visual people, and to be on a screen like this, I had closed down my screen so I could snap some pictures of this. But I really think the parents really need to be involved, not just on a survey level. Thank you.
Sharon?
Oh, Sharon, you're on mute, sweetie.
So the subgroups are actually going to be able to reach out to any number of people that they feel that the chair of the subgroup feel would help in making the decisions. So it's not limited to just two parents at all. So the subgroups are going to reach out to other people. Similarly, the head nurse of the school district will be the representative for the medical portion of it, but she's already expressed her concern and wants to make sure she can get feedback from all of the other nurses in the district. So we're not limiting who the subgroups can look to for input.
But let me ask a question then. So if we want input and parents don't know how to get in touch with us, or we can't get in touch with them, we've left out a big portion of the population, because it really is about the parents. Also, are they going to feel comfortable sending their kids back to school? I know that the kids, my opinion is that they need this socialization, and the parents need to let us know how these kids have done during remote learning, because this isn't just about keeping kids home because someone's going to get sick. It's about the psyche of the kids also being homed and not being around other kids, and that social interaction. And that's papers that I have copied and read, and pediatricians have said the important thing is the social interaction these kids are missing. So I just want to make sure that somehow the parents can get in touch with the district, that they know about this, and they can be part of any subcommittee out there. Thank you.
That's what I said at the beginning. I said that anyone, this slide right here, when I was talking earlier, I said that the subcommittee chairs, once we're done with the presentation, that the chairs would be posted with their contact, that would be posted on the website. And then I said that if anybody is interested in joining the subcommittees, they can certainly do that. And all they would have to do is contact the chair. I also said that it is going to be a tight timeline, so the flexibility of the meetings are not there. So if there's a parent out there that wants to be part of Plan Ops, happy to them to join, the parents to join, as long as they understand that the meetings are the meetings because of the timeline and the information we have to get back to the board in a timely manner.
I'm glad to hear that, Dr. Moseley, because I do think that we have parents in our community who have expertise in some of these subgroup areas, who would love to give back to the schools with the information that they have in their brains. But when you talk about the inflexibility of meetings, are you referring to the fact that they are mostly in the daytime, or?
There'll be, what I'm saying, the inflexibility of the meeting this gets back to what I said earlier around this right here is, let me just see if I can find it. Where is it?
That's okay. I know the timeline is very tight.
And so we can't, we can't postpone. We don't have the flexibility in this case to, ultimately the board needs to have some recommendations in their hand-ish by the end of of July or early August. It's also going to take us some time to synthesize this data and to write it up and to give it to you in a timely manner. So that's where we have to be. Our time management and scheduling of these meetings have to be strategic so that we have enough time to get it to the board in a timely manner. In terms of time of day, it's like I don't know what the schedules are for individuals who volunteer. Sometimes meetings start at 7 a.m. and they're over by 8:30. Sometimes they start at 6 and they're over at 7. So I don't know. I can't answer that, but I'm sure the chairs are going to be as flexible as they can. But we have to realize that this is a tight timeline.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
I appreciate that. So, Ms. Johnson, were you finished with your questions, or did you have something else?
No, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Johnson. I have Ms. Timmons, then Mr. Guarino, then Mr. Norris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the first slide, you have students, and I was wondering, was they student reps or is it just students? You said student. Is that a student, or did we agree to have student reps on this task force or not?
We have two students. Actually, they're with us tonight, the Joshua Gow and Stephen Norris.
Okay.
At the last Board of Ed meeting, or one of the last Board of Ed meetings, volunteered to be on this task force. So they are assigned.
Okay,
Yep.
that's the only question I have. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Timmons. That made me think of a quick question related to that. How frequently is the task force as a group of 26 meeting? I know the subgroups are meeting as they meet in their thing. How frequently is the task force meeting?
I probably every 2 weeks. That's my guess. The hardest part of this, honestly, is scheduling the meetings. It
Right,
really,
26 people in one meeting is challenging.
and to be honest with you, 26 people, meeting, and every 26, everyone's got something. So now, and people are working, coming and going. I know I'm working during the day, so it might be, I don't know, Friday night. It might be a Saturday. I'm not really sure at this point. That's why, to be honest with you, what we're really trying to do is, depending on what comes out of this meeting, we'll start scheduling actually tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your willingness right from the get-go to be flexible with your time. It sounds like you and the other members of the task force are expressing a willingness to meet in unusual times in order to get this done.
It might be Saturday, to be honest with you, because Saturdays no one's working, or
Right.
Sunday. So I mean, I don't mean to sound extreme, but it's hard to get 26 people that don't have a scheduling conflict at work and have family obligations 5 days a week to meet on Tuesday at 6 or something like that. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know yet. We have to kind of run that through the planning process, but it is going to take some time.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Guarino and then Mr. Norris.
I didn't really have a question, but I just wanted to recognize Dr. Moseley for putting this together, and Ms. Giulio and the staff, because it's there's a lot to think about, and there's not a lot of time. There's a lot of questions, and there's not a lot of time to make this decision. So I just wanted to thank them for putting this together, because there's a process here, and there's a lot of work here. So
thank you. I really appreciate that, Ray. I think putting this together means putting a plan together, which takes a lot of time just to go through the process. So thank you, Ray, for acknowledging that.
okay. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Guarino. And Mr. Norris, thanks for being patient. Welcome.
My question, actually, Ms. Simmons took my question. So that was good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Hopefully y'all are still able and willing to participate, because I do think student voice is important in this process. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to do what's best for the district and safety, but hearing from students how this is affecting them is critically important, I think, because one of the things that maybe it's my personal opinion, but one of the things that I think is happening to students as remote learning has stretched out is that now we're seeing effects on their social emotional health. And so we really need to be cognizant of how these decisions are affecting kids. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, does anyone else have a question at this time or a comment?
Great.
I do have one other comment, a question, not a comment.
Yes, please go ahead, Ms. Timmons.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I was wondering if the Board of Aldermen have to do anything with approving this task force membership or anything to do with reopening the schools at all?
I don't think at this time. I don't think I don't think there is that level of involvement. I think with you, the Miss Raymond mentioned the things, the challenges, what we need. Honestly, we have to just start get going on this, because the hardest part is scheduling the meetings, and so that's one thing. I'm sorry, Ms. Timmons, I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't mean to not answer your question. At this time, I don't see that the aldermen would like to be involved in the task force. However, if there's aldermen or other women who would like to be part of those subgroups, come on down. That's fine. All are welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, please, Dr.
Dottie.
Yes, please, Ms. Oden.
We have 3 different levels. We have elementary, middle school, and high school, and it's been very different for remote learning for high school kids as opposed to elementary. And when I look at the two parents on the committee, I'd like to make sure that we have one from each level. I agree with Ms. Johnson. I think the parental involvement is important, but I think just as we have a teacher from each level, I think it would be important to have a parent from each level. Thank you.
I believe the 2 parents have children at the 3 levels.
One has one at various levels.
I believe I believe that was the reason. I could confirm that, but I believe that was the understanding.
Well,
It's 2 parents, but they each have at all 3 levels.
Well, I still think it would be good to have 3 parents that, just to get a variety of ideas and perceptions of how things are going. That's one of my concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Oden. I wonder if it wouldn't be a good idea after the subgroup information, the chair's information is put up on the website, simply to send out a communication from the district to parents with a link saying, thank you for participating in our survey. We've created these subgroups. If you would like to volunteer to join one, please contact the chair and here's a link or whatever. I don't do well writing off the cuff here on television. But certainly Ms. Hines and Dr. Moseley, you have that skill.
I don't. I'm like you. I prefer to. No, I think out loud, but I think you and I are on the same page on this one, Heather.
Okay, so do you, Dr. Moseley, need something from the board at this time?
No, one of the things that we're just once we're done here, honestly, I'm gonna reach out to Stacy, I'm gonna start planning, Tara, start planning, and getting this going. I think I'd say probably, I'd like to say sometime after the 4th of July. How about we schedule another work session before the product is finally due? If that works for the board.
Yes, I think that would be critical because I'd like an update kind of in the middle, especially if we're running into any kind of challenges or barriers. I think it's good for us to know about them before the end, so especially if we discover, especially because I think that information is changing rapidly regarding COVID-19 and infection rates and advice from the states, and we'll have the task force, the New Hampshire task force recommendations by then. So I think it will be a good idea for the board members to get that information from you, work session before you have your final recommendation. So yes, thank you.
So
not to interrupt, sorry, but I've already scheduled one for Monday, July 13th.
Oh, Ms. Quintanilla, you are magical. Thank you so much.
All right, works.
And is that at 5:30 as well?
Yes, it is, 5:30 on a Monday night.
30. Okay. All right. Is there any other business regarding this topic, the topic of the task forces? Yes, Mr. Guarino.
I just want to thank, also, I want to recognize staff, teachers, and staff who are taking part of the task force and the subgroups, and thank them. I know there's a lot of teachers out there that, you know, they had a rough time with the remote learning, and a lot of them had to adapt, and they probably all have a lot of good advice to give. So I just want to recognize that the teachers, and thank the teachers and also staff that are going to be part of these committees and subgroups, and thank them for taking part in this, and just to let them know we're listening. I'm listening to what they have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I can now see everybody who has their cameras rolling. I don't see anybody, and I don't see. Oh, I see Ms. Timmons. You're on mute, though.
Sorry. I'm waving to my granddaughter. Bye. She dropped dinner off.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad that you are getting doorstep delivery. That's wonderful. So, okay. Anything else? Seeing nothing, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I'm hungry.
So,
Seconded by moved by Ms. Timmons, seconded by Ms. Giglio. Mr. Guarino, when you are ready, please call the roll.
Okay. On the motion to adjourn, Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Johnson?
Yes.
Ms. Giglio?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Oden?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, thank you. And everybody give yourselves a pat on the back for being concise and to the point this evening. I am super proud of us. I'll see you guys next week.
We're adjourned at